Okay, hey everybody. So I'm Paul Debevec. I work at the University of Southern California's Institute for Creative Technologies, and I'm about to do something very difficult and impressive, which is to immediately follow Ken Perlin giving a talk. So fortunately, I have little experience doing that, and in fact, the last time I did that was just last week, where I was slightly after him at the FMX conference, and the organizers of FMX in Stuttgart asked if I could put together a series of talks about the science of virtual reality. And of course, we had Ken started off, and then we had a number of other presentations, and I ended up talking about light fields for virtual reality. Kind of like that. And let's see here. Who here knows what a light field is? Excellent. Okay, cool. I'm going to do a little review of like Lilia came to my talk, and well, you knew what they were before. But anyway, and I'm going to go right back to the source material. Okay, so who knows what year the paper titled Light Field Rendering was presented at SIGGRAPH?
What year?
What year? 96. There it is. And this was that paper. Mark LeBoy and Pat Hanrahan from Stanford presented the concept of the light field. There were actually two other papers in the same session that presented the concept of the light field, which just goes to show how important it is to think of a catchy name for your paper. In fact, Ken points out that the whole idea of a light field is actually very similar to an idea of something called a planoptic function, which is like the space of all rays, or the set of all rays within space that you can make images out of. And light fields are built around a nice property of that. But anyway, these are some images here. These were computer rendered images. So the basic idea of a light field is like we want to synthesize very rapidly any image that you could take of an object or of a room. And when we think about all of the possible images that we can take, well, like the camera, let's see here, I carry a camera with me so we can actually demonstrate this here. Okay, so the camera can be at any 3D position, right? And I guess you can point it in any direction. And once you point it in any direction, then the lens covers a range of directions. I earlier held up a little camera that's kind of fun here because it will take, with these two fisheye lenses, this is a Ricoh Theta, and probably some of you have it already. It came out pretty recently. And then in one shot here, like this, smile, it will actually take all of the directions in the scene simultaneously and make a panorama with one click, which is pretty cool. So, but you still have to decide as a photographer which 3D position in space you want to put your camera. So anyway, we've got X, Y, Z for where the picture's taken from, and then once we take the whole panorama, we've got a theta and a phi of all the possible directions that light can come from. There. That's 5 dimensions, X, Y, Z, theta, phi. And then the light field concept is built around the fact that you can, in empty space, reduce this by a dimension. Because if you have photographed, let's say like there's a particular point on the wall here, right? This point right here, not a very interesting point, but let's take that point. I can photograph that point on the wall from here, and I'll get a certain pixel value on the camera. If I use the same camera settings, if I move directly away from that point, take a picture of the same point on the wall, just moving along that ray, I'm going to get the same pixel value. Or if I were to push closer to that point, I'm going to get the same pixel value. And so we're really missing a dimension of data because along a ray, everything's the same. So it's really a 4-dimensional data set, and that's what the light field is. And it tends to be, that's basically what the original slide was showing. Suppose we want to generate an image of this object here. I'm not exactly sure what kind of object Mark LeBoy had in mind when we drew that, but imagine that we had taken photos of it from all directions around, and this is kind of showing camera center, and then those are all the directions of all the rays that we got of the object. And we took all these photos from 1 meter away on this surface of this circle, or in full space it would be on the surface of a sphere. Now we want to generate synthetically an image that isn't one of the images that we already have. It's an image that's from 50 centimeters away. So now we actually have to use different rays of light than the ones that we captured from any particular image. But the good news is that if we look at all the images, we got all the rays of light that we actually needed. So from this position here, we need to get those rays that you can see there. And if we need this ray right here, we can just look backwards and grab it out of this image. If we needed this right here, we can look backwards and grab it out of this different image, or this different image. And actually, if we needed one that's right in between these two cameras, then we can interpolate between the two views and then get an idea of what that pixel should have been. We might have to do something clever. And here's the video that went along with the original light field video rendering paper here. I'll try to talk over it. And so this is your 1996. This is a pretty high quality rendering of a dragon model. And it's changing the viewpoint in real time because this 4-dimensional set of rays has been pre-computed and stored in a whole bunch of texture maps. And so you can do more than just spin it around. You can actually move in and move out, and you get all the right perspective effects. And the light field data set looks something like this. It's like lots of images of the dragon. And I think so you can kind of zoom, it's zoomed in so you get some sense that there's a dragon in there, but it would have covered the entire surface of the dragon everywhere. And these are all taken from slightly different points of view. So it's a pretty dense data set of the dragon. Now there's another way that you can also look at this data, which is that for any given point on the dragon, you can see what color is that pixel as you move the camera around. So there's 4 dimensions of data. You can have the camera position as the inner loop, or you can have the direction within the field of view as the inner loop. And so there's 2 ways to visualize that. And the thing that happens when you actually move in and out is that instead of just literally using one of the original renderings, you're going to pull for different parts of the scene different pieces of these different images. And so when he zooms in, you can see that the pixels that we're actually using kind of spread out to the different images. And when we zoom out, they spread out to other images. And 4 dimensions of data is still a lot, but it's way better than 5 dimensions of data. If you can drop a dimension of something, that's a huge deal. That's like going from a movie to a still image. And that means that there's a lot more that you can do when that's all that you need to deal with. So my most recent experience in light fields and a lot of the popular press about light fields recently, in the last 5 years or so, centered around this little camera here. Does anyone have a Litro camera, or has anyone taken a picture with one? We have one person here. We have Ken as well. I'm glad that whatever the investors did and whatever they're getting out of this company and however much money went into the company, I mean, to the fact that I got to buy for a couple $100 a light field camera. I mean, it's all worth it to me. That's great. I don't know if it was worth it to everyone who invested in the company, but I had fun, so thank you very much. And the light field that this takes is kind of interesting because it really only gets a light field of your scene across the surface of the lens of the camera. So all of the re-rendering that you can do, changing the viewpoint of your scene, it's all within this little 2.5 centimeters of the front of the lens. And the way that it takes the images is that this is like literally what is off the sensor of the Litro camera. It's a like 11 megapixel sensor. And then Ren Ng, who did the paper, he's one of Martha Boy's graduate students, puts a little array of tiny lenslets over the sensor so that if you zoom in, you can see this big image is made up of little images. And these little images here all say, for that pixel, what color is that pixel seen from all of the different entry points on the lens, so all these little directions that you can look at it from. Now, if your camera happens to be focused right on something, like it's focused right on this guy's fingers right here, then what happens is that all of the different directions you can look at it from out the front of the lens hit the same point on the finger, and so you get the same color for each one of these little lenslets. But if you're out of focus, like this hand that's way back here, and it's out of focus, it actually changes the image depending on where you're looking at it from, because some of those rays will hit the finger, some of them will miss the finger, it's out of focus. And so what would have happened in a normal image, it's blurring together different versions of the finger. In the Litro image, though, you can actually refocus it, because you can grab just one little part of the lens that's like having a very large depth of field, because it's like a pinhole image. and then you can grab any position that you want within the lens, or you can add together different images to simulate different parts of the depth of field. So that's what light field photography was in the popular press for a while. But then something very exciting happened, which is that a company that I work with and consult for, last SIGGRAPH, completely unbeknownst to me, demoed at their booth some form of light field rendering. So this is a company called Otoy, and I know this company because they licensed some of our LightSafe technology a while ago. And the head of the company, Jules Verback, decided it would be cool if they used their fast GPU-accelerated rendering algorithm, which is called Octane, to render out light fields that you could then view in virtual reality. And so this is, like a complicated scene graph that's going on here. If you take a look, this is a complicated scene, and it's got a lot of geometry, it's got a lot of material properties, and it's impressive that the Octane renderer can render it very fast. As it moves around, it's interactively updating all of the rays. But it still takes a couple seconds for enough rays to be traced so that it's nice and smooth and you don't have noise in the rendering. And as a result, it's interactive, but it's not quite real-time rendering. But it would be great to get this quality of rendering happening in real time, particularly in VR. And of course, the thing that makes VR cool is that when you move your head around, or that it makes you feel like you're really there, so when you move your head around, the scene responds to you moving your head around. And so you need to have all those views ready to go, or you have to generate them very quickly. So what Otoy was demoing in SIGGRAPH last year was this kind of quality of scene, once it's fully rendered, stored as a light field. And so here it is as a light field, and now it's absolutely full quality as you move around. And you can do this at 60, 75, 90 frames per second, no problem. This is just one slab of the light field, but you can put more slabs around and create all different views. And so this is showing it in an Oculus DK2. This is one of the eyes, and it's using the tracker from the DK2. And you can see you move your eye around this scene, very high quality, interactively. So it would be really cool to see that level of realism in VR. Now that's just for computer-generated scenes. What would it be like, and what would we have to do if we wanted to see that kind of sense of presence of really being there for a real-world scene, something that's actually photographed? One of the problems with live-action VR right now, the kind that you'll see from Jaunt or NextVR, is that the viewpoint is pretty much fixed. Some of this is just static panoramas shot with much more expensive versions of this, that you can look around in all directions, but it's just mono and you can't move your head. You move your head, the whole world kind of just shifts with you in a way that might make you nauseous. There are 3D stereo panoramas where it does some kind of interesting multi-perspective capture. And you have a left eye view and you have a right eye view that always have some parallax between them, no matter which direction you look. Although if you look up, problems happen. But anywhere around the horizon it works pretty well, and you get 3D stereo. But still you have the problem that in live action, you move like this, and the scene doesn't adjust to you. Unlike the great Crescent Bay and DK2 and HTC Vive demos where you move around and it's like, oh my god, I'm really there because my motion parallax is showing things. So if you want to produce motion parallax in live action VR, it seems like what we should really do is record lots of points of view. Let's record an entire light field as we record VR. Now it's probably going to be complicated and expensive to build the ultimate camera for this. I am not particularly interested in gluing 150 GoPros together to get a live action light field VR camera. You can do the math in terms of how much data that is. You need about 4K over the hemisphere for this to work to get the resolution that we expect to have in the next generation VR headsets. But you basically have a gigapixel, at every moment in time that this thing shoots. So it's going to be fun. Maybe it'll take 2 decades before we have some technology like that that's really working. But we wanted to play around with this kind of data set and start working on algorithms that's going to make it practical to work with it a lot earlier on. And I scratched my head a little bit. Is there a way that I could shoot a data set by moving a camera around to different positions. So if I just had one camera, how can I move it? And you can put it on like a robot arm or do something. But then I realized that all these cameras are in the same place, except for a horizontal rotation and a vertical rotation. And in fact, that's what panoramic camera rotation mounts do. And I have a buddy named Greg Downing who works for X-Res, and they shoot high-res panoramas all the time. Of course, when they do that, they're very careful to put the camera in the middle of the thing, at the nodal point, so that all of the images in the panorama will then stitch together and line up. But what I asked him to do is if he could put this bar along the middle and then shoot the panorama so that the camera is 35 centimeters forward of the center of rotation, and it would shoot out the entire light field. And in addition, since we want to be able to get the wide field of view necessary for a VR headset, we put his highest quality fisheye lens that gets 180 degrees field of view. So in fact, by moving it around like that, you capture all of the rays that you need in order to shoot a live action light field. A static one, you have to shoot for a while and leave the room so you don't show up as a fluttering mess over on the side of the room. But this is kind of what it looked like when we got this thing happening. So here's the rig. So here's the camera. You'll notice there's a second camera over here. That's as a counterweight. So it's might be a little I mean, it weighs the same, right? We don't want to have an Indiana Jones model. So
It's not capturing anything.
it's not captured. I mean, we thought of running it. We put a little GoPro here too, so we got all these pictures where this camera's in the way of the scene too. But so there's that running. And now here's what it's doing. It's going to move around and it's going to spiral with the two motors. So the camera's going to start kind of down here, and it's going to go around, and it's going to slowly go up. It's going to spiral around. We're going to get the whole thing. That's the idea. And so these are our views that we're getting around here.
What about motion blur?
Well, so you can shoot it either with a short shutter speed, or you can have the panoramic camera rotation mount just stop at every position and then take another view here. And it's chucking a little bit, so I'm going to play that slide again. That's one of our Lightscape students in the background, by the way, our friend Kenny. Let's see if it plays a little bit better. It's doing so well.
What about changing daylight?
Changing daylight. In this particular data set, I don't know, we started about 10 a.m. and then it just worked after that. The daylight didn't change very much. If you look very carefully, you can see some parking cars on top of one of the parking lots.
How long does it take?
We did one that took about 10 minutes, and we did one that took about 2 hours. So the still one takes 2 hours, the video one takes 10 minutes. So you can probably notice as you go around, you get a little bit of parallax. If you follow 2 points here, on one side of the image will be like this, on the other side of the image will be like that. So then this is late at night. We finally got Jules into the headset. We've got the real-time light field viewer here. We didn't quite get the full field of view vertically that we captured into it the first time. But he's actually experiencing motion parallax in a good way. And so he can move around. So these reflections actually shift quite a bit with respect to the viewpoint as you move around. And in a normal panorama, you wouldn't have those reflections changing. And you get a sense of the reflections on the tables here and a good sense of the depth of the buildings outside their office compared to the buildings that are, or the furniture that's inside. And like you can with light field rendering, you can actually focus the light field far or focus the light field near. So if we take a little bit here we're focused near, we're moving around, you can see the background is a little kind of ghosted together. But then if we shift the focus plane to the background, then you can see that's totally sharp. Now the foreground's a little bit ghosting, and then we'll shift the focus back to the foreground. If you focus somewhere in between, it works pretty well. The resolution of VR headsets today, it's a pretty compelling experience. And what we're working on right now is we actually have a really good data set for doing 3D stereo. And we'll solve for the 3D shape of the scene, project the light field onto the 3D shape of the scene, and then hopefully everything will be in focus and look pretty good. and hopefully at one of the next VR Los Angeles meetups, or possibly at SIGGRAPH this year, we'll actually have this available to demo, and you can put your head in some fun light fields. So that's thing number one that I brought to talk about. And the other thing I thought that Connie thought might be kind of fun is talk about a fun facial scan that we did, because one of the other things we do in our lab involves scanning faces. One of the projects that we recently scanned a face for was the Digital IRA project. It was a collaboration with Activision, and so this is a digital face. It runs in real time, and it has scans of our friend Ari Shapiro. He's another graphics researcher at USC. We got lots of facial expressions, and then we and Activision rigged together a face, nice skin shaders and such. And then we can render a photoreal face in real time. In fact, Activision has now bought one of our light stage devices, so we had to build another one. It's actually just across the street from us, so it's sort of a very skewed density graph of light stages that we have here over the planet. But it's, we can presume, going to be used for upcoming Activision video games, and might have some really good faces for that. One of the places that I got to talk about the light stage process not too long ago was at a conference on 3D scanning and printing at the Smithsonian Institution. These are the national museums that are in Washington, D.C. There's the Natural History Museum, there's the Air and Space Museum, there's other places that Ben Stiller likes to visit. And we had a chance to talk about our facial scanning technology. And as it turns out, the Smithsonian is all about digitizing things from its collection and trying to put them online. There's actually a really nice website called 3d.si.edu that has scans of Amelia Earhart's jacket, of the Wright Flyer, the first airplane, of like the cosmic Buddha statue. You can zoom in and see all the inscriptions and such. And one of the things that they scan are these two items here, which are life masks of President Abraham Lincoln. So he doesn't look great in this. I don't know what happened with the eyes here, where he was alive for both of them. They're not death masks, they're life masks. This one was right before he became president, and this is shortly before he was assassinated. And you can see changes in the face over the history. So it's from the 1860s. And it turns out he's the last president that actually had been recorded in 3D in any significant way. In fact, he's only one of two, and only one who was actually recorded in office. There was a 1756 life mask of George Washington as well, but that was well before he became president. So the Smithsonian had the idea that, well, maybe we should try to document our leaders a little bit better. And they asked, first of all, just asking, hey, would you be able to scan a VIP in Washington, D.C., and take the show on the road, basically, and do a mobile unit. At the time, we were kind of working on a mobile unit, and I thought, well, by the time that they're, actually going to ask us to do anything, I'm sure this thing is going to be all done and working great. And I said, well, of course we could. This would be a great thing. And then last May, like in the middle of May, we got a call that, well, we have a date for this scan that we told you about. It's going to be June 9th. It's the President of the United States. It's going to be done in the White House. And could you send some data from your scanner that's indicative of what you think you can do, by early next week, and then we can take a look and make sure it fits into the process nicely. So we had an interesting Memorial Day weekend, and essentially what we did is we built a mobile light stage in 4 days, and that was done by basically tearing equipment off of our existing light stage, which is just off screen here to the left, and pulling as many of our light sources and all of our digital cameras that we could grab to get as much of a sphere of illumination as possible. We had to build some custom electronics to be another controller board for our cameras and our light sources. Our light sources, fortunately, are pretty neat and they're reprogrammable. They have like 12 white LEDs in each light, and we put little polarizing filters on them, and the polarizers are in different directions over the different LEDs, so we can change the polarization of the light. It was kind of a secret project at the time, so at some point we actually had to hide the scanner for a little bit when some people came in and And we had to build something that was a little bit complicated because originally we were told this would happen in the west wing of the White House. And that is very narrow hallways. So we had to build a scanner that could go through a hallway and like a single door, which is only about 80 centimeters wide, and also pack up into a crate that can fit into an airplane. So we had to build it so that it could open and close and do some things. So we did that. And we shipped it to Washington, D.C. We tested it at the Smithsonian Institution for a little bit. It mostly worked during the week. And then it was time to, and then it was showtime. So we had a day to set up, and this is how you bring things over there. You just kind of drive on up and just sort of park in front and load things out. This is Shipping You here, who designs our electronics. And there's Graham Fife up there from our group, and some of the great folks from the Smithsonian. And here they are helping us bring this thing in. And I'm sure you're familiar with the term to roll out the red carpet for somebody. They rolled up the red carpet for us. Here, so this is, and then as it turns out, they decided, hey, this is maybe a good photo op. Let's not just do it in some little closet in the West Wing. Let's do it in the state dining room of the White House. Which was good, except one of us had brought a sandwich, and then at some point someone actually said, you can't eat in here, this is the state dining room. So we had this, and by the way, that's the east room on the other side of the White House. That's the biggest room there. Like if Sting is going to give a concert to the White House, they do it in that room. Or like when President Obama announced that Bin Laden had been killed, it was under that area there. But anyway, we were in the state dining room, and we rolled things in here. They rolled the carpet in there up for us there too. Then we had a bit of time to set up. There's Graham Fife there. There's Paul Graham, one of our graduate students. Here he is testing it and realizing they were kind of going for a little bit of a photo op here, because by putting us in front of the fireplace, then we have President Lincoln here able to watch over all of the festivities. And I hoped to meet with the White House photographer early and like show him good angles to get it from and things like that. Turns out there was no time for that. He just showed up when we did it, but he kind of knew what he was doing. And he got a pretty good shot of this whole thing. So anyway, the next day we came back. We did like one test. I actually tested on me because in terms of public height, I'm the same height as President Obama. We didn't know if seated height would be the same because people can be different heights when they're seated. And so we brought over a chair from the Smithsonian. And even when we have like a pretty important person in our light stage, like Tom Cruise or Angelina Jolie or Will Smith, we'll still just set them there and tell them, check your email for a while we focus our cameras and set our settings and things like that. They're used to having to wait around while people adjust equipment, because that's part of the filmmaking process. And here, time was apparently relatively limited, so we had to just quickly. There was no time to focus. There was no time to frame. Our standard processes were not good. Fortunately, we were able to bring a couple of little monitors, so we could see if he was in frame. We framed so tightly. Our lenses were closer to him than we would have in the light stage. 105 millimeter lens is only 3 feet away, or less than a meter away. And we'd get him in here. And so the hope was that if, with the chair, set on me, that he'd sit down and he'd be the right height, basically. And it turns out that worked out great. He was like perfectly the right height. But he sits up straighter than I do. I guess it's not surprising. And so it was good news. I didn't have to like reach under and any of that. No one was excited about that. But I did have to actually get the back of the chair, and I had to like drag around a little bit, and that was like a little bit nerve-wracking. But it turns out after 2 little adjustments, we were in frame. Thank goodness we seemed to be in focus, and then the scan did pretty well. So there we go. And there we go. We got a smile scan. We got 2 shots of him for a presidential sculpture. And those are our lighting conditions. So what we do is we play with the polarization of light and the directionality of the light as well. And that's what gets us our high resolution scan. I mentioned something about the polarization of the light. We've got polarizers on all the lights, we've got polarizers on all the cameras. This is our standard light stage, trick. And we can get cross-polarized illumination from everywhere. So you don't see any shine to his skin. And then when we switch the polarizers on the camera, the shine comes back. And the shine is very important for understanding the highest resolution of the face, because that's the light that doesn't exhibit subsurface scattering. It doesn't blur out under the skin. So you can take this image, subtract this image, and end up with this image, which is only the shine of the skin. And then by watching what color those pixels are, just the shiny parts, when you light it from kind of blurry light from the right, blurry light from the left, blurry light from above, below, front, and back, then that gives us a very high resolution surface orientation map, all the surface normals for the face per pixel. So we can get down to about 1/10 of a millimeter accuracy. And since our cameras were closer to him than usual, we actually got below 1/10 of a millimeter accuracy, probably about 70 microns or so. So the scan came out pretty well. We got a lot of detail there. It's kind of aliasing in this particular projector, which is so low res, but I'll zoom in, and then we've got texture maps. And then here's what we've got. This is the second take that we had for the sculpture that people wanted to do. And then right after we did our scan, there was another chair waiting for President Obama to go sit in, and then the Smithsonian guys used some handheld Artec EVA scanners. It's like a structured light scanner, but it's kind of pulsing and blinky. It's not terribly high resolution, but they got the rest of the data necessary for the back of the head and for the shoulders so that there could be a 3D printed bust. So the idea is that this is going to be a sculpture of him made from life, from real measurement, that will go into the National Portrait Gallery, and it'll be like the first 3D printed head of state to show up in a museum. So that's actually been done thanks to donations from 3D Systems. And the Smithsonian guys had to drive out to Pennsylvania to pick up the sculpture and drive it back in the trunk of their car, and then they got it back in time for the White House Maker Faire, and they presented it, and it seems like it went over pretty well. That should be available for view sometime in Washington, D.C. And according to this White House video, somebody got to print out a little version for their office. We haven't gotten one yet. I hope at some point, because that would be nice. And that was light fields for virtual reality and scanning and printing. President of the United States, thank you.